South Dakota, August 1823. The man on the ground is not dead. He should be. Anyone looking at him would say so. His back has been opened to the spine. His scalp hangs loose. His throat bears the puncture marks of something that weighs 600 pounds and had every intention of finishing what it started. The bear is dead now. His companions killed it, or helped him kill it, depending on who's telling the story. And now those companions are looking at each other. And then they're looking at him. And then they're looking at the wilderness stretching out in every direction, full of Arikara warriors who had already killed several of their party. And they're doing a very human calculation. The man on the ground can't walk. He can barely breathe. He is, in every reasonable estimation, already dead. He just hasn't accepted it yet. Two men stay behind with him. They wait, they watch, they collect his rifle, his knife, his flint. Then they leave. They tell the others he died. He didn't. And what happened next, what that man did, with a broken leg, open wounds, no weapons, and 200 miles of hostile wilderness between him and the nearest American fort, is one of the most extraordinary true stories in American history. You may have seen the movie, but you don't know the half of it. History is more than just dates and names in dusty books. It's a shadow stretching across time, full of secrets, tragedies, and whispers that refuse to die. This is Morbid History with Thomas Gloom. Hugh Glass was a fur trapper, a mountain man, the kind of person who considered sleeping outside in a Dakota winter a reasonable lifestyle choice. In the summer of 1823, he was part of the Rocky Mountain Fur Company's overland expedition, led by General William Henry Ashley, pushing through territory controlled by the Arikara. The Arikara had already attacked the expedition earlier that year, killing 12 men. Nerves were raw. The company was moving fast and quiet. And then Hugh Glass, scouting ahead, walked into a thicket. The thicket contained a grizzly bear. More specifically, a mother grizzly with her cubs. She hit him before he could raise his rifle. What followed was, by all accounts, one of the most violent animal attacks in the documented history of the American frontier. The bear mauled him repeatedly, tearing into his back, shredding his scalp, puncturing his throat. He drove a knife into her during the attack. His companions arrived and finished the job. But the bear had already done hers. The injuries. Let's be specific, because specificity is what separates this story from legend. Hugh Glass had a partially torn throat, lacerations to the back so deep that bone was exposed, multiple broken ribs, a broken leg, wounds on his scalp deep enough that, by later accounts, his skull was visible. He was alive. Barely. Unconscious most of the time. By every medical standard of the era, and frankly most medical standards today if you're in the middle of the wilderness with no supplies, Hugh Glass was a dead man on a delay. The abandonment. Expedition leader Andrew Henry offered payment to any men willing to stay with Glass until he died, then give him a burial. 2 volunteered. John Fitzgerald, experienced, practical, and morally flexible, and a teenager named Jim Bridger, who would later become one of the most celebrated scouts in American history, but who in 1823 was still 17 years old, very much in the grip of a bad decision. They waited 5 days. Glass did not die. He kept breathing, kept bleeding, kept refusing to let go. And then, with Arikara pressure mounting and Fitzgerald's patience gone, they took his rifle, his knife, and his flint. Everything a man needed to survive in the wooded wilderness. And they walked away. They told the expedition he was dead. He wasn't. And he soon woke up alone. The crawl. 200 miles. That's the distance between where Hugh Glass woke up and Fort Kiowa on the Missouri River, the nearest American settlement. He could not walk. His leg was broken. His wounds were infected. He had no weapon, no fire-starting tools, no food. And so, he did the only thing he could. He crawled. He set his own leg. He packed his wounds with mud to slow infection. He ate berries, roots, insects. Historical accounts describe him driving off a wolf pack from a bison carcass so he could take what he needed from it. He crawled to the Cheyenne River. Then he floated downstream on a log. Then, eventually, he walked. He was found by Lakota Sioux, who treated his wounds and helped him reach the fort. The journey took approximately 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Open wounds, broken bones, no weapons, no tools. And his fuel source? Pure, focused rage. The revenge, and the part Hollywood invented. Glass tracked down both men. Jim Bridger he found first. The young man was still a teenager. Glass looked at him and let him go. Whether that was mercy or just the cold arithmetic of a man who'd learned to spend his anger carefully, we don't know. Fitzgerald was harder to deal with. He'd enlisted in the U.S. Army while Glass was crawling after him, which meant killing him would mean Glass's own execution. So Glass confronted him, demanded his rifle back, and left. Not exactly forgiveness, more like, I came all this way and now the army is blocking me. Let's just go with deeply annoyed. Here is what the 2015 film The Revenant added. A son. A fictional Pawnee son, murdered by Fitzgerald, who becomes the engine of Glass's revenge arc. In reality, no such son existed. The film needed a murdered child to explain why a man would crawl 200 miles through the wilderness. The true answer, that Hugh Glass simply refused to die, refused to let 2 men who robbed him of his weapons in the wilderness face no consequence, apparently wasn't enough for the writer and producers. It should have been, though. Hugh Glass survived several more years of frontier life, continued trapping, and was killed around 1833 and an Arikara attack near the Yellowstone River. The same land, the same danger, right up to the end. Hugh Glass is remarkable, but the gap between what happened and what ends up on screen isn't unique to him. Hollywood has been mining history for material since Hollywood existed, and every time it makes the same trades. Add a love interest, sharpen the villain, clean up the ending, cut whatever complicates the runtime. Here's what gets cut. The sinking of the RMS Titanic, adapted as Titanic, 1997. The RMS Titanic struck an iceberg on April 14, 1912. Between 1,400 and 1,500 people died. The film gets the iceberg right. What the film doesn't linger on is the math. The overall survival rate was approximately 37%. But if you break that down across classes, the numbers paint a clearer picture. The survival rate among the first-class passengers was between 61 and 62%. The survival rate amongst the third-class passengers was a staggering 24 to 25%. This was not an accident. Third-class passengers faced locked gates and inaccessible lifeboats, while crew prioritized the upper decks. The ship sank in 2 hours and 40 minutes. The class system worked faster. Jack and Rose were fictional. The locked gates weren't. The Silver Bridge Collapse, adapted as The Mothman Prophecies, 2002. Between November 1966 and December 1967, over 100 residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reported encounters with a large, winged, red-eyed creature. Then, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. The 2002 film frames the Mothman as a supernatural warning. The eyewitness accounts are genuinely strange. Lonely highways, men in black, phone calls full of static, lights in the sky. The official cause of the bridge collapse? A corroded eye-bar. A single structural component that had been slowly failing for years. It's my belief that nobody sent a winged creature to warn Point Pleasant about deferred infrastructure maintenance. 46 people died because a bridge was deteriorating and nobody fixed it. And in some ways, that's the more frightening story. Operation Anthropoid of World War II, adapted as Anthropoid, 2016. In 1942, 2 Czech paratroopers trained by the British SOE were dropped into occupied Czechoslovakia with one mission: kill Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich was the Reich protector of Bohemia and Moravia, one of the principal architects of the final solution. Hitler called him the man with an iron heart. Josef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš ambushed Heydrich's open top car in Prague on May 27, 1942. Gabčík's Sten gun jammed. Kubiš threw a grenade. Heydrich survived the initial attack and died 9 days later from sepsis reportedly from horsehair upholstery entering his wounds. Then came the Nazi reprisal. The small village of Lidice was razed, every man shot, women and children deported. Over 1,300 Czechoslovak civilians were killed in the retaliation. Gabčík and Kubiš were cornered in a Prague church with 5 other paratroopers. They held off hundreds of SS troops for 6 hours. They died, most by their own hand rather than surrender. The 2016 film Anthropoid, starring Cillian Murphy, is one of the most historically faithful war films ever made. I strongly suggest you check it out. The Battle of Mogadishu, adapted as Black Hawk Down, 2001. October 3, 1993. Mogadishu, Somalia. A U.S. Special Operations mission to capture lieutenants of warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid was expected to take 1 hour. 2 Black Hawk helicopters were shot down. The rescue operation became a 15-hour urban firefight. 18 American soldiers were killed. Somali casualties numbered in the hundreds. The film depicts American soldiers with genuine courage. And this is accurate. They were brave. They were also inside a mission that was premised on assumptions of air superiority and rapid extraction that collapsed the moment the first helicopter went down. The Somali fighters defending their city had their own story. The film mostly doesn't tell it. Bravery was real on that street. The policy failures that put those men there were equally real. Both things are true. Only one of them, though, made it into the runtime. Jordan Belfort's Massive Fraud, adapted as The Wolf of Wall Street, 2013. Jordan Belfort ran a Long Island brokerage that defrauded investors of an estimated $200 million through pump-and-dump schemes in the late 1980s and 1990s. The Scorsese film is 3 hours of spectacular excess, and it is genuinely a great film. It is also, whatever Scorsese intended, extremely good at making Jordan Belfort look like a good time. The film spends less time on the victims, the retirees, the working class people who got cold called and lost their savings. Belfort cooperated with prosecutors, testified against colleagues, served 22 months of a 4-year sentence, and built a second career as a motivational speaker. A court ordered restitution to be paid to victims, but as of recent reporting, only a fraction of what was owed has been paid. The real story of Jordan Belfort is not a cautionary tale about excess. It's a case study in what happens when white-collar crime is treated as merely a career interruption. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be talking about President Jordan Belfort. Ugh. I wish I was only kidding. The life and trial of infamous murderer Aileen Wuornos, adapted as Monster, 2003. Aileen Wuornos was executed in Florida in 2002 for the murders of 7 men. The film, for which Charlize Theron won the Oscar, does something the coverage of Wuornos rarely bothered to do. It asks how she got there. Abandoned by her parents, raped as a child, living on the streets by her early teens, working as a sex worker on Florida highways for years, surviving violence that was rarely investigated. A person who fell through every system designed to catch her before she could cause harm, or have harm caused to her. She maintained her victims had threatened or attacked her. Investigators disputed this. The truth, as in most similar cases, is complicated and uncomfortable. What isn't complicated? Eileen Wuornos was a person the system failed at every stage. Then, the system executed her. And then, Hollywood made a movie, asking the question that should have been asked 30 years earlier. Every one of those stories has something in common. The real version is harder than the movie. Messier. Less resolved. The villains don't face justice cleanly. The victims don't get monuments. And sometimes the real story doesn't just complicate the film, it exposes the film as almost quaint. Case in point, in 2015, Ron Howard directed a movie called In the Heart of the Sea, about a whale that sank a ship. And I want to be precise here. A whale, a sperm whale, a living animal, deliberately rammed a ship. Twice. The film is compelling. The real story is something else entirely. Greetings, dear listeners. Thomas Gloom here. I'm stopping by to share two brief things. One, if you are enjoying this podcast, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And also, leave a review. Whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or somewhere else, leaving reviews helps to promote this podcast and get it before new potential listeners. Let's grow this thing together. Also, depending on where you listen, you might be able to leave comments on episodes. I would encourage you to do that. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm open to feedback. The second thing is that I have been active on TikTok. I'm posting 2 videos a day and plan to do so into the future, so search out Morbid History Pod. The profile image is the same as the podcast logo. Find me there. Back to the show. November 20, 1820. The American whaling ship Essex is approximately 1,500 miles west of the Galapagos Islands. Open Pacific. No land in any direction that matters. The crew spots a pod of sperm whales and lowers their hunting boats. Standard procedure. They've done this hundreds of times. What happens next has no precedent in American maritime history. One whale, a large male, estimated at 85 feet and somewhere around 80 tons, turns toward the ship. It accelerates, and it hits the bow of the Essex at approximately 3 knots. First mate Owen Chase, aboard the ship, described the impact as striking a rock. The hull shuddered. Water began to enter. Then the whale surfaced, appeared to collect itself, and rammed the ship again. Even harder this time. The Essex sank in minutes. 21 men, 3 small whaleboats, the open Pacific, and a decision that would define everything that followed. The wrong choice. After the sinking, the crew faced a navigational question. The nearest land was the Marquesas Islands, approximately 1,200 miles away. But the men had heard stories about the Marquesas, stories about cannibalism among the indigenous population, stories that were largely exaggerated, racially motivated, and, as it turned out, spectacularly ironic. So they didn't go to the Marquesas. They chose South America instead, roughly 2,500 miles in the other direction, requiring them to sail south first to catch the trade winds, extending the journey even further. They sailed away from land because they were afraid of what they might encounter there. They were about to discover what they were capable of in the middle of the ocean. 95 days. The provisions ran out fast. The freshwater containers failed. Men began to die of dehydration and starvation. The first ones to die were buried at sea, as maritime tradition demanded. And then one man died, and the survivors looked at each other. And they did not bury him. There was a precedent for this. In maritime law and custom, it was known as the custom of the sea. The grim, unwritten acknowledgement that men adrift with nothing to eat would, eventually, consume the dead in order to survive. Courts had recognized it. Sailors knew it existed. So they ate him. And then more men died. And the dying slowed. And the survivors drew lots. The last lot. The lot fell to Owen Coffin. He was 17 years old. He was also the nephew of Captain George Pollard Jr., who commanded the boat. By the accounts that survive, Pollard begged to take his place, offered himself instead. Coffin refused. The draw was the draw. He was shot by a fellow survivor. His remains sustained 4 men for several more days at sea. Captain Pollard would carry that moment for the rest of his life. Who survived? Of 21 men, 8 lived. 3 were rescued from Henderson Island, a remote, uninhabited stop they'd found and chosen to leave. 2 boats were found separately. Chase's group on February 18, Pollard's group on February 23, 1821. Pollard was found still clutching the bones of the men he had consumed. Most survivors returned to sea within a year. It was the only life they knew. Pollard was given command of another ship. It also wrecked. After that, no Nantucket owner would insure a vessel under his name. He spent the rest of his life as a night watchman in Nantucket, walking the same streets at night that his crew never came home to. Why the whale did it? The simple, honest answer is this: we don't know. Sperm whales have the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived on this planet. They communicate in complex acoustic patterns. They demonstrate what appears to be grief. The whale that rammed the Essex may have been responding to distress calls from the injured members of its pod, the ones the crew had just harpooned. It may have perceived the ship as a rival or a threat. What we do know is this: an animal that had every reason to consider humans its primary predator, in a year when Nantucket whalers were killing sperm whales by the thousands, swam directly at the ship that had come to kill it. And it is genuinely difficult to argue with the whale's reasoning. What the film left out. In the Heart of the Sea acknowledges the cannibalism. Yet, it does not dwell on that detail. What the film cannot quite bring itself to fully reckon with is the irony at the center of the story. These men sailed thousands of miles out of their way because they feared encountering cannibals. They became what they feared in order to survive. Herman Melville heard the story from Owen Chase's son, read Chase's first-hand account, and later met Pollard in person. He called the meeting one of the most memorable of his life. The encounter directly inspired Moby Dick. In Melville's version, the whale is a symbol, an obsession, a metaphor representing forces beyond human comprehension. In the real version, the whale was just a whale. And to me, that somehow is worse. History often congratulates itself for preserving the past, but preservation is selective. We keep the version of Hugh Glass that fits on a movie poster. The Man of Iron Will, the Vengeance Arc, the Oscar Award. We quietly drop the part where the system of justice, an army enlistment, protected the man who robbed him and left him to die. We keep the Titanic as a love story against the backdrop of disaster. We quietly drop the part where the class system functioned perfectly, right up until the hull gave way. We keep Owen Coffin as a footnote, a plot point, the thing that happened in the boats that we acknowledge and then move past. But Owen Coffin was 17 years old. He drew a bad lot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean because his captain made a navigation decision based on a xenophobic fear that turned out to be ironic. And he accepted it. And that is not a footnote. That is the story. The real stories, the ones before the polish, before the runtime, before the score tells you how to feel, are full of people who don't get monuments, who don't get the third act, who got left in the thicket or went down with the lower decks or drew the wrong lot. Based on a true story, yes. But which true story? And whose? This has been Morbid History. I'm your host, Thomas Gloom. If this episode made you want to find the version of the story they didn't put on the movie poster, leave a review and follow me on Instagram and TikTok for more tales from the shadows of our past at Morbid History Pod. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, history can be a lot of things, including morbid. I mean, it wasn't the full story, but Leo deserved that Oscar.